The US administration is in trying to erect a national regime of secrecy, a national regime of obfuscation, a regime where any government employee revealing sensitive information to a media organisation can be sentenced to death, life imprisonment, or espionage, and journalists from the media organisation with them.
Julian Assange created WikiLeaks to close the gap between whistleblowers coming forward and the public's ability to see the information they bravely provide. He is currently a political prisoner in the Guantanamo Bay of the United Kingdom, Belmarsh Prison, awaiting the second phase of his extradition hearing, which begins on September 7, 2020. All 18 of the charges against him relate to the material provided by a single whistleblower, Chelsea Manning.
The US State Department says it is bracing itself for the latest batch of classified information to be published by the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks. It's thought the leaked documents will include reports from officials in Washington and diplomatic posts around the world, and many fear those diplomatic cables will embarrass the US and its allies about the way they conduct international relations.
Chelsea Manning, soldier, network security expert, and analyst, became a whistleblower, torture victim, political prisoner, Maryland Senate candidate, and an activist as a result of her experiences in the US military. Manning began communicating with WikiLeaks in 2009 after first contacting the Washington Post, the New York Times, and Politico. Self-described journalist Adrian Lamo reported Chelsea to the FBI on May 25, 2010. On May 27th, Manning was arrested outside Baghdad and spent over 75% of the following decade in federal or military custody. She is the only U.S. military whistleblower and journalistic source to be convicted of espionage.
No evidence was adduced of that. There was no claim of that. The only claim was that he was a whistleblower giving information to the public via a media organisation. It cannot be the case that when a journalist's source gives the information to the media for noble reasons, that they are charged with espionage. There's no relationship with a foreign power. It is an attempt to set a precedent to shift how journalism is done in the United States to make the security services uncriticisable in practice.
On February 18, 2010, WikiLeaks posted a diplomatic cable from the U.S. ambassador to Iceland detailing the pressure campaign mounted by the United States in an attempt to influence Iceland's financial future. Though widely unreported, the release of the Reykjavik 13 cable resulted in the recalling of the U.S. ambassador and his subsequent firing. The remaining 251,286 diplomatic communiques, now known as Cablegate, dropped late that year, sending shockwaves through the halls of power and the US media.
Would you ever consider not publishing something that was leaked to you?
Would I ever consider it? Of course, we've had many occasions to consider such matters in theory, sometimes in practice, but we don't, unlike every other media organisation on the planet, we don't operate ad hoc. We have a policy, we have a public policy, and the public policy is that we promise to represent whistleblowers like a lawyer does in getting their material out to the public with just one provision, that the material is of diplomatic, political, ethical or historical significance and has not been published before or is under some kind of threat against publication. The Guardian would say their fear of libel suits even for information that is true. The Guardian removed 2/3 of an entire cable which had a list of Bulgarian organised crime figures in it. It removed the fact that mentioned in a Kazakhstani cable that E&I was corrupt. It removed that the Kazakhstani political class in general was corrupt. So let's be very, very careful to scrutinise every claim, every single claim that something should be held secret. The fundament of justice is that it's got to be open and it's got to be transparent. And a decision to censor something has encoded within it a secret process. Because if the process is not secret, the information is not censored. So that is the original sin of censorship. As a decision-making process, a quasi-judicial process, it is not a transparent process, it is a closed, secret court.
Following her arrest, Chelsea was transferred stateside, where she spent a year in solitary confinement on the U.S. Marine Corps base in Quantico, Virginia. Her treatment at the hands of her own government raised international concerns. In 2012, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Juan Mendez, labeled it cruel, inhumane, and degrading. She was transferred again to Leavenworth, Kansas to serve out a 35-year sentence after pleading guilty to 17 out of 22 charges. Her sentence was commuted by President Obama in January of 2017. She was offered a visiting fellowship at Harvard in September of 2017, which caused Harvard fellows with CIA ties and then CIA Director Mike Pompeo no small amount of outrage. Her fellowship was nearly immediately rescinded. She ran for Senate in Maryland in 2018 in a bid to oust Ben Cardin. She was free and living her life. Commutation, however, is not the same as a pardon.
While the Reykjavik 13 cable released earlier in the year garnered scant attention from the US press, the same cannot be said for the November 28, 2010 publication of what became known as Cablegate. The 251,287 document drop over the course of less than a year enraged the US government. Calls for Assange's imprisonment to murder rang out through DC, while the public and independent media poured over what was at the time the largest number of classified documents ever released. This led to Amazon refusing to host WikiLeaks' server and a rare show of corporate cooperation between the credit card companies and the United States government, as WikiLeaks suddenly found itself unable to accept donations. From May to July 2010, 91,731 documents were released containing field reports describing the brutality of US imperialism and adventurism in Afghanistan. They disclosed the cover-up of civilian killings, the death squad-like behavior of counterintelligence units, and other war crimes committed by US and coalition forces.
WikiLeaks has released more than 700 top-secret US military documents which provide intelligence assessments of nearly all those detained in the infamous Guantanamo prison. The files passed on to the New York Times and Britain's Guardian newspaper uncover years of manic intelligence gathering post 9/11, which resulted in the incarceration of innocent people on questionable evidence. In some cases, the ownership of a certain model of Casio watch, thought to have been given to Al-Qaeda students, was enough to get a one-way ticket to Gitmo. There are currently 172 individuals still held in the camp who are rated high risk by the Americans, despite President Obama's vow to consign the camp to history.
During this same time period, WikiLeaks released the Collateral Murder video, which showed a US Army Apache helicopter opening fire on civilians, killing more than a dozen people, including 2 employees of the news outlet Reuters, as well as the first responders, and critically wounding 2 children on their way to school. In February 2019, Chelsea Manning received a subpoena to testify in a secret grand jury against WikiLeaks and its founder Julian Assange. Objecting to the secret nature of grand juries and the use of them as political weapons, Chelsea Manning refused to comply. On March 8, 2019, after being found in contempt of court, she was placed in solitary confinement for 28 days and spent a total of 62 days before being released from federal custody.
More than 330,000 documents make up the Iraq War Diaries, which were released in full on October 22, 2010. Along with the Afghan war logs, the material shows the unmitigated disregard for the lives of Iraqi civilians on the part of coalition forces and led to international calls for investigations. It was the single largest reveal of military documents in history. The Guantanamo Bay files were released in late April of 2011. They detail accounts of cruel and inhuman treatment of prisoners labeled enemy combatants, ranging from 12 to 89 years of age, as well as a public relations manual for personnel to use when forced to speak around words like suicide and hunger strike. Several of these prisoners were guilty only of being political enemies to their home governments, including an Al Jazeera journalist from Pakistan. While running for president in 2008, then candidate Obama promised to close down the torture facility. Gitmo, however, remains open to this day. On May 9th, 2020, after only 7 days of freedom, Chelsea was once again forced to appear before the grand jury to testify against WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. Just as before, Chelsea refused to comply with the grand jury. She was once again found in contempt of court and ordered back to jail. During this period of imprisonment, the court fined her $500 for each day over 30 days in jail and $1,000 for each day over 60 days thereafter. U.S. law states that as long as the judge believes more time and more fines will break the prisoner, that person will remain in jail. Manning made it abundantly clear she would never break and that she had nothing to add to her testimony from her court-martial in 2013. This is the only time in U.S. history a private citizen has been incarcerated and fined in such a way and led to yet another UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, to label Manning's treatment as torturous. The 10-year-long grand jury into WikiLeaks and their founder Julian Assange was dismissed on March 12, 2020. Manning's testimony was no longer being compelled by legal demand, and she was finally released from custody. The fine she had incurred during her reincarceration totaled a staggering $256,000. Chelsea's close friend, Kelly Wright, launched a crowdfunding effort to help pay off the massive and draconian fines. This task was achieved in less than 48 hours. The Manning leaks have become a part of our history. Every single person who has read from them gained a more full picture of the American empire, the true cost of war, and the real price of being a whistleblower in the U.S. regime.
Action for Assange is a decentralized network of activists raising awareness about the ongoing torture and persecution of Julian Assange and the disintegration of free speech. To learn more about us, find us on social media or go to www.action4assange.com. You can also watch our twice weekly online vigils on streaming platforms everywhere.